you grew up when it was possible to do exactly what you did and to be who you are now. This is a very small piece of time that allows us to have a course of our own and to get the education we would need to do it. And then there's a sort of timing opportunity that I would think that women who are present now need to know, for one thing, they have an appreciation of where, and I gathered that when we talked earlier, that you do have an appreciation for the opportunities that we as women have now that we didn't before.
Oh, yes.
And the idea that that there's a limited amount of time for human beings in general if global warming continues. We are all of us alive now could help tilt history if it were our inclination to do so.
In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. Today, my guest is Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. I just have to tell you, when I first had her on the show, you're going to hear in the intro, I was just downright giddy. I mean, there's no other word to describe it. But at the beginning of the show, I really just needed somebody to pinch me. I mean, I have all her books. I have studied her pretty much all my life for years. She's just huge in the industry of spirituality and Jungian psychology, not to mention women's activism and rights. And she's a prolific author, as you will hear. And I had her on my show. I mean, I just couldn't believe it for a moment. It took me a while to kind of get in the groove. And also, it was just such an interesting show because it was the first time in all the episodes that I've done where a guest actually asked me a question. That's never happened before. And I was a little taken aback, but wow, I really enjoyed it. And it was really a beautiful conversation that we had. Before we get into the episode, though, I do just want to thank, wow, what a beautiful and heartfelt review I got on Apple iTunes. And it's from IRLELYN, who says, I started listening to Amy's podcast after beginning my healing journey during the pandemic of 2020-2021. Her show is so inspiring, and she really talks from the heart. Her voice is just what I needed in my healing journey. After experiencing the big T trauma early in life and then living in cognitive dissonance for about 27 years before I realized something had to change. It was out of the balance of the masculine and feminine I learned as a child that emotions were weaknesses, and so I spent most of my adult life thinking I didn't need them. I am currently in the middle of this healing journey and this distorted life view and unpacking my past patterns. Amy is really helping me gain a new perspective to life, and just listening to her heartfelt words is calming and feels like home. If you're struggling in any way with your inner critic or shadow, you have found the right podcast to learn to step into your heart. Wow, 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 wow. I hope I say this correctly. Ireland, thank you so much for that absolutely beautiful Apple iTunes review. It really, really means the world to me. Thank you, my friend. And if you want to help me and help the show, the best way to support me is to leave a review and share the show with a friend, as well as subscribe. So thank you so very much in advance. My guest today, Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen, is a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a Jungian analyst, an activist, and an international author and speaker. She is a distinguished life fellow of the American Psychiatric Association and a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, as well as a former clinical professor of psychiatry at Langley Porter Psychiatric Institute, University of California Medical Center, and a past board member of the Ms. Foundation for Women, the International Transpersonal Association, and the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. She is the author of 13 books in over 100 foreign editions. She is also a NGO permanent representative to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women from the Women's World Summit Foundation in Geneva, and represents the Pathways to Peace, the Millionth Circle, Earthchild Institute, Women's Perspective, and the International Public Policy Institute. In addition, she's in 3 acclaimed documentaries: the Academy Award-winning anti-nuclear proliferation film, Women for America for the World, the Canadian Film Board's Goddesses Remembered, and the Femme, Women's Healing the World, and is perhaps most well known, though, for her books on the archetypal psychology of women and men in the development of spirituality. Most notably, the book, which has sold over 1 million copies, and I have, marked up quite well myself, Goddesses in Every Woman, Powerful Archetypes in Women's Lives and Gods in Every Man. So, on today's show, we talk about the Chinese New Year, the year of the water tiger, which is what we're in right now, and how that's unusual and the symbolism of that. And as we move from the Piscean Age into the Age of Aquarius, Dr. Bolen shares her thoughts on this state of equality that we are now entering, and she shares her optimism at what's coming. It's very exciting, and it's nice and refreshing to hear somebody optimistic about all these changes that we're in the midst of. She gives us her perspective on the matriarchy versus the patriarchy, and how, yes, we used to be matriarchal societies and how we're now venturing back into a more egalitarian state. And we get into myths, common misconceptions about myths, and how they have transcended all cultures and times, and why they're so important and powerful, and most importantly, how knowledge of myths can affect us in our lives right now. And of course, we get into our girl Aphrodite, how the modern culture has suppressed this archetype, and therefore her energy in you. You got to listen to that part. It's super powerful and very, very important. And we share about how Aphrodite is more than just sexuality and that energy in us, but rather that of beauty and creativity and relationships, and how that Aphrodite energy is involved in so many things in our lives, more than just our sensuality. Jean shares with us her thoughts on how becoming who you were meant to be is so important and can be so fun. And I asked Jean about her landmark book, Goddesses in Every Woman, Powerful Archetypes in Women's Lives, and a little bit of a breakdown of those for us. We get into the importance of self-knowledge and individualization, as well as the difference between stereotypes and archetypes. And then the women's movement and activism. Jean shares with us her thoughts on motherhood, as well as the post-menopausal period that women go through, and how this is an important time when you find that you have time on your hands and you have the power to make choices over what you're doing, and that's a critical time in life. And Jean shares with us her story and uses it as an example of how a lot of times when we're on a calling path and our journey steps are not clear, how to navigate during that time, and how her path, the twists and the turns in her life journey, led her to ultimately be living her soul's calling. Very, very inspiring and educational. Jean shares with us her expertise on synchronicities and getting into harmony with synchronicities and what she means by what she calls the liminal time that we're in right now, this time of transition where we are in a threshold period. And again, Jean clarifies and enlightens us on the misconceptions on Aphrodite and who she really was, as well as tips for the modern woman to balance that masculine energy dominance that so many of us have been stuck in, and how we can live more harmonious with all of who we are, both the masculine and the feminine. Finally, I asked Jean about her thoughts about the modern goddess and feminine uprising movements that are going on now. And of course, the power of women's circles and how they are helping to transform not only each of us individually, but the world, and the importance of sisterhood and cooperativeness, which for that matter, I'd like to point out my women's circle I invite you to join, which you can find online at amyfournier.com, or just email me. All that will be in the show notes. Come on and join my women's circle. We'd love to have you. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give to you Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. And welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. My guest today is a living legend that I'm completely freaking out about having on the show, everyone. Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. Welcome to Awakening Aphrodite.
Delighted to be with you, Amy.
Oh my goodness. Everyone, I have all her books, all of them. I've read them many times. She is just such not only a mentor who I haven't had the pleasure to physically meet yet, other than today, which we're meeting virtually, of course, here, but she's also a heroine of mine because she's just so accomplished, so wise, so beautiful, so centered, so intelligent, so loving, so many things, so many souls. I'm so grateful to have a woman like you. I always say women need great role models in the world, and you are certainly one of them. You have been a mentor to me, and I'm just deeply honored and thrilled to have you on my show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone heard your amazing bio, which there's a lot more to it than just that. I did only give the highlights because you're extremely accomplished. Is there anything you just wanted to share as we open the show with people on who you are and maybe even where you're at in your life or anything at all?
Well, yesterday was the beginning of the Chinese New Year's, and I read about it and read that it is the year of the water tiger. And just the image of this whole idea of this is a year where a tiger is muscular and a presence. And when we moved out of the last year and into this new year, I also felt something about optimism because I've been sheltered in place because of the pandemic for 2 years now. And it started to feel as if something is going to change this year, not right away, but maybe this year, the symbol of the year of the tiger will affect us all, and we will, especially women, because this is also the time in which we've changed from the time of Piscean Age, which was the patriarchal age, into the Aquarian age, in which there's an equality between the male and female. And it's about time that women and the feminine in men, as well as the feminine period, affects, connects, and saves planet and humanity and life on it. So I'm feeling my activism get stirred up by thinking maybe the stars are with us. Maybe the something is helping us to do the right thing.
I love it. Well, as they say, life is timing, right? And to your point that now might be the time, and all your life's work of activism and the significant contributions that you have made in so many different fields and the world wasn't ready for a lot of it maybe, or it was the groundwork for now, okay, here we go, game on, like the planets are behind us,
I like that.
Yeah.
Game on.
And I'm on your team, that's for sure. I'm on your team. And maybe you can share with the audience a little bit about that, because something I've been studying deeply is the history of women and the history of culture, for that matter. And actually, I know that you had said in some of your work that long before there was God in the psyche of humankind, there was the goddess.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, but geez, honestly, Dr. Bolen, a lot of people aren't aware of that. They weren't aware that there were even matriarchal societies or egalitarian societies thousands of years ago. So can you please help educate us on really the history of humanity that we aren't aware of?
Well, imagine a time way, way back when human beings had the experience of realizing that new life always came through women. The children are born through women. The animals are born through feminine aspects of that particular animal. And so the creator, one would think, was considered feminine. And then if we moved into a kind of more spiritual sense of there being a divinity or something far vaster than any human being can even imagine, it wouldn't be surprising at all that one would pray to the Great Mother, or to feel that we're out there hoping we can find food. Well, you do look to the feminine in general. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's sort of an instinct that then moves through history with us. And then when it became known that sperm and egg came together to create new life, it seemed that the male principles then took over and or incorporated into the sense that men are more powerful and dominate, and the idea is dominate rather than share. Now that's just a kind of real sketch of the possibilities of what would you inherently think. And what is it about human beings that pray? What is it about human beings that do ritual? What is it about human beings that do art? I mean, when you get pictures of what was drawn in caves thousands of years ago, it's just amazing. There's something that is in the human being that other species don't do. The dolphins may have brains that are huge and live together peacefully in the ocean, for example, but they don't leave anything behind. What is it about human beings?
I never thought of that. That's a really good point. They don't leave anything behind other than they're young, but they don't create beauty. They don't create something just for the aesthetics of it like humans do. And cross-culturally too, that all cultures do what you mentioned.
We are an interesting species. We also haven't turned into our skin color may be different, but basically most species have met like dogs. There are all sizes of dogs and things like that. Human beings stay within a certain familiar range and have forever as we've known it.
Mm-hmm. And what I love too about your work, because I know you're deep in mythology, and we're going to get into the the work of the goddess, and of course our girl Aphrodite and archetypes. But in my study of myths, what's really fascinating is that they transcend culture. There's myths in all cultures, and they're all similar in a lot of their messages and themes. So here again, we have something that's a human thing. It's not, or I guess it's not specific to a culture. It's something that all humans do, which is to the point of the archetypes, right? So there's this collective unconscious that we share as humans that is a common theme that we all have.
It sure is.
So can you please explain to us, first of all, what you think of as a myth, because a lot of people have the misconception that they think it's not true or it's something fake, so to speak. So can you maybe define what you would call a myth and why it's significant in today's modern world for us to understand?
Well, it's amazing that certain stories, like the Greek mythology stories, have existed and stayed alive for so long. It means that something has to resonate with us. I mean, a true myth is a story that reaches deeply into psyche, into mind, heart, and somehow stirs us. So over time, often the names of the myths change in different cultures. It's just that the Greeks were so good at differentiating the variations of the goddesses or the myths. And so being a Jungian analyst and a psychiatrist, what's amazing about the mythology in Greek mythology is that it psychologically is so true still. It seems to be a story about a divinity somewhere, someplace, but we can identify with it because they represent qualities in us. And when you recognize that there are qualities in us that are like Aphrodite or Artemis or Zeus or whomever, and you realize that there are strengths and there are problems with each of those archetypes. And the more you know yourself and realize what your shadow side might be as well as your gifts, the better off you are. And it also is not just focusing on pathology, it's focusing on this is the gift of the pattern that you seem to come into the world with. And the gifts are over here, but boy, you better take a look at the problems that go with them as well. And whether it's acceptable in your family. Like Aphrodite, in patriarchal kinds of societies, is suppressed in an ordinary, a real woman who must take Aphrodite and not express it because we have the Aphrodites that we've turned into, say, courtesans or prostitutes or something, and then we can, the men can use that kind of a woman, but you don't want to be one. So if you have Aphrodite as an energy in you, you have to learn to kind of contain it, suppress it. And it's fun to talk about Aphrodite being not just sexual, but the quality of beauty, the quality to see beauty, the quality to create beauty, and be able to be so involved in what you are creating that you lose track of time. I mean, this is what you do when you're in love. You lose track of time. Well, if you are a creative person, Aphrodite, and it's not just focusing on another person, but on what wants to grow out of you into your work, whatever it might be, it could be visual, it could be music, it could be words, then you are moved by that Aphrodite energy to interact with the medium that you're in. And there's something truly deeply fun about becoming who you were meant to be.
Right on. Right on. I'm all about it. You know, I just love everything you said, because in one of my early episodes on the show, it's back on episode 2 or 3, and I explained the name of the show and I went into Aphrodite from my study, and I definitely want to dig into your knowledge about that a little deeper. But I really was adamant to share with people that there's so many misconceptions about her. Everybody thinks there is the goddess of sexuality and sensuality and love and beauty, and that's all true and good. But I love that you brought up the broader points that, guys, this is love of life. This is love in essence of what love is, which is unconditional acceptance and expressing your soul and your heart, and however your heart is going to express itself in the world, whether it be painting or the way you make the table or the way that you, dress, or it's that energy, that life force in you that comes out as love is the energy of Aphrodite. And yes, it's sensuality too, because we live in our heads currently, I'm always trying to get people to drop down into their body and embody what they're feeling and use their body as a tool for information, their senses, like turn on your nose, your ears, your eyes, and your heart and feel. So Aphrodite teaches us about the sensuality. You want to expand on that at all? Or?
You're doing just fine.
Oh, please. I could go on forever. Just take the mic away from me, because I definitely want to pick your brain for sure. You're the expert. But I guess I'm just trying to make the point that people don't realize Aphrodite's so much more than just sex. And she's certainly, and you talk about this in your work, that she's, well, just to back up, we probably should have you talk about your 7 major female archetypes, because Aphrodite's one of them, but she's the special one, which I love, because she's the alchemical goddess, unlike the others. So maybe if we ask our audience to just hold off on that, so you can give a little background as to even what a goddess is, and the 7 primary ones that you've discovered in your work that most women identify with.
Well, when I wrote Goddesses in Every Woman, I took the primary Greek goddesses and put them into 3 categories. And the Greeks themselves only had 2 categories. And one of them was just the ordinary feminine. But there were 3 goddesses that were in a special category called the virgin goddesses. And this was Artemis, Athena, and Hestia. And these are the qualities in women in which some part of them stays virginal. That is, no matter what happens to them, there is still some untouched part that is one unto itself. That's kind of the virgin goddesses. And each of them have their own history and their own talents and own qualities and stuff. And when I go into that, but all the rest of the goddesses and human women in Greek mythology are all potential victims of the male gods in Greek mythology. So you think, well, here are these 3 goddesses that stay virginal. Now in women, real women, that part of her stays virginal, but she could be sexual, she could be vulnerable. There are other parts of her too, so that the point is to sort of know yourself better by knowing what the actual patterns can be, and you become the expert once you know what the patterns are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the good and the bad, like to your point, that there's good and bad to every archetype. For you to be aware is empowering. Well,
there may not be necessarily bad in say the virgin goddess that Hestia, who's goddess of the hearth and who is an introverted woman or an introverted part of a woman who puts everything around her in order and who can be just present, absolutely present in the present moment, and doesn't try to influence other people particularly or whatever. Well, that's a quality that's good to have, but to get along in this social world, in this competitive world, you'd better start having those other archetypes present as well. So I'm just suggesting to people that want to know parts of themselves that it's helpful to know qualities, because most every archetype has a shadow. And the more you realize that, like, oh, right, when I got angry and I got virtuously Artemis in my feminist activism, I lost touch with other parts of myself that exist. So that's really the point of knowing the goddesses in every woman, or the archetypes in every woman, is to know yourself better.
And you make a very important distinction in your work. There's a difference between archetypes and stereotypes. And the stereotypes being the roles that society and culture, our parents, whatever, kind of expect of us. And a lot of us lose who we really are meant to be, and to be able to self-actualize, because we go down the path of trying to be the good girl and what people expect in the stereotype, and we're really not being true to our soul, which might be a different archetype, like a woman that really is an Aphrodite, but was grown up with a doctor family, and she was more of a Athena, and that's, you know, not true to her nature. So she never gets truly fulfilled and feels joy in her life. Maybe is that possible?
But see, these days it's quite possible to live into your 80s and 90s even.
Yeah.
Or at least 60s and 70s. And in the culture in which women are supposed to only be carriers of new life, mothers, wives, that's the role that women are supposed to be or limited to. Now we are in a time that actually began in the United States towards the end of the 1960s. And the 70s was the decade of the women's movement. And that was also an angry movement, because as well as a creative movement, because women began to realize that they had been put in certain categories and were not allowed to grow into who they could really be. Now, to be a Jungian analyst is to appreciate that there's something called individuation, which is what I translate into becoming who you were meant to be. Now, whether it was that because we're not a blank slate, we come into the world with certain inherent kinds of propensities and talents and things, and certain of them are suppressed by our families or culture, and other ones are encouraged. But they're there. They're there to grow into to ourselves, to become who we are or could be. And then one of the things is that the women of the women's movement were affected by the 70s. We've got women in Congress. We never had women in Congress except one for a long, long time. So many things are in flux and change, maybe just in time, because we also are moving toward global warming. We are at a time when the virus that has infected so many of the people in this world, the virus does not respect territoriality and boundaries. And when we look back just over this short period of history, I mean, history since the 60s, 70s, 80s, and to present is a teeny tiny slice of time. And yet during this particular time, we saw in the 70s, not just the emergence of the women's movement, but we also saw Earth from outer space.
Right.
We saw our mother, the Earth, and she was awesome and beautiful. And the boundaries did not exist. So we saw that from outer space, and we just sent out a major space telescope for the first time in decades. So lots of good things potentially are happening right now. And right now, the sense of being on a planet that is beautiful, that when human beings could see our planet, our mother, the Earth, from outer space for the first time, the thing about it was really on the way to the moon, and the whole exploration of the moon was the big deal. But what moved people was seeing our beautiful home against enormous empty space. We saw that, and that image also is the image of the spirit of the self, or the larger spirituality that we can get in touch with. The Tibetans have the same image. You see a Tibetan thing, and it may have many different colors and designs in it, but it's always like there's a circle in the middle of a square. And that is the symbol of the large S self, which you could call God, goddess, all it is. You know, we get in touch with that, we human beings. And every religion tries to say we own it, but actually no one has a big enough ego psyche to really absorb the whole meaning of it. And so just to bask in it, to feel a sense of the beauty of the images that we are moved by, or to see, well, anyway, to get back to Aphrodite, which we sort of started from.
Yeah.
there is the sense of beauty and awe that comes. It is not a indiscriminate sexuality, sensuality at all. It is a quality of appreciation, of deep sense of beauty, and of being able to be in the present moment. Which, if you get carried away by that and you're a woman and you are in a culture that is right in the fight right now over do women have the right to decide whether they're going to be mothers or not? You know, the kind of sense you could be, if you are Aphrodite in the present moment, and in a moment you are drawn to have a deep connection, which could be both spiritual and sensual, and you find yourself pregnant and you're only 17 or 16, or you're in the middle of some other piece of your life, do you have any choice about whether you can not go through with this pregnancy but be able to live the life that you were, the track you were on? This is something that is up right now before our Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The sense of women, every time patriarchy starts to get a little bit of power over after they lost it, it's like put women in their place.
And control reproduction.
Yes.
Control reproduction. Mm-hmm.
And then they seem to have an idea that, well, just have the baby and then give it away if you don't want it. Well, they don't appreciate that if you do get pregnant and you do carry the baby for 9 months and it's put in your arms afterwards, there's a quality of, well, no, you can't just give it away.
Yeah.
You can.
That just gave me goosebumps. That just gave me goosebumps. You know, I guess maybe this is really off topic, but I just have to, I mean, how's that then for women who give their babies up for adoption? Like, how would that work in a woman's psyche? Like, they think, okay, I am going to give this baby. They know as they're carrying it. But then when they actually have the baby, and to your point, they hold it in their arms, and that special magic moment happens, and they're like, but I'm giving this baby away. I already agreed to give it away. That must be tremendous heartbreak.
It really depends, again, back to the archetype.
Oh, okay.
That if you are primarily a Demeter mother, if your primary archetype is the mother archetype, yes, you also probably wouldn't give it away.
Right.
But if you might have many children until you started to realize how you don't have enough for the kids you have, and your own physiology is suffering from it. And so why can't a woman who wants to have a child when she wants to have a child and she's ready for it? Mm-hmm. We all have decisions to make. So that when a woman gets pregnant, under certain different circumstances, I mean, right now, the way the Supreme Court is leaning on Texas and other places to support what they are saying, which is you don't have a right to have an abortion. You could be raped and there was no sensuality in it. It was a disastrous, awful feeling of being raped. And then you got pregnant. And now you're not supposed to do anything about that except carry the baby. And then you have to fortunately, you probably even under those circumstances would love the baby that you gave birth to, but the baby would represent that person who raped you. I mean, it's just it's a horrible thing. I think that people who pass these laws that don't allow women to make choices about whether they will be carriers of new life or not, that they have no sense of empathic connection with imagining how they would feel if they were in that position.
Indeed. I do want to get into your work with activism for sure, and talking about the liminal time that you talk about, which is so critical in what we're going through right now. But before we move on from myths, I have to ask a question that I want to know from someone like you. Because the patriarchy was dominant at the time that the Greek myths were basically made, how would that influence the stories that were told? You mentioned how all the goddesses were kind of victims or victimized or whatever. I mean, for example, that when, what was it, Zeus and his siblings divided up the earth and the sky and all that stuff, like the three sisters got nothing, the three female goddesses got nothing, but all the brothers got all the elements. And so obviously that was a patriarchal expression of the Greek religion at the time who wrote these myths. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, it affects all of mythology, the patriarchy, and maybe could it have been different if it was more egalitarian in the way these myths were written about the goddesses?
Well, this would take quite a deep dive in.
Sorry, I have a really deep, obsessive mind sometimes. But it's like, that's the Artemis in me. That is just so not right. That's so not fair. I was Artemis growing up, the tomboy, the whole thing. And what do you mean girls can't do it? Why not? I played on the boys' teams and all that stuff. Boy can do it. I can do it better. Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
you grew up when it was possible to do exactly what you did and to be who you are now. This is a very small piece of time that allows us to have a course of our own and to get the education we would need to do it. And then there's this sort of timing opportunity that I would think that women who are present now need to know, for one thing, they have an appreciation of where, and I gathered that when we talked earlier, that you do have an appreciation for the opportunities that we as women have now that we didn't before.
Oh, yes.
And the idea that that there's a limited amount of time for human beings in general if global warming continues. We are all of us alive now could help tilt history if it were our inclination to do so. And it would be an inclination to do so if you are aware that there are parts of you that want to grow up in you. And one of the things I do want to, since we're ranging far, we're ranging over many different fields. One is that in patriarchy, when the point of women is to be a sexual object, a marriageable object, then to bear children, take care of the children. And then when you get to be of a certain age, your life, the reason for...
Thanks, see you later.
Something like that. Now grow into being a respectable grandmother or whatever it is, but don't ruffle anything, don't change anything, just be who we expect you to be. Well, what happens these days is that women who have been very busy doing education tasks, whether it's activism, whatever it is, just towards the end of their potential pregnancy time, suddenly they often start to feel the impulse to want to have a child while it's still possible. And it may not be possible for only with this next sliver of time. And so what's happening is a number of women then become mothers in their late 30s and 40s, for that matter. And we are living longer if we have reason to live longer and we look after our health. So what happens when you are postmenopausal and you now have some level of choice to either conform to what your family, and especially if you happen to be in a significant size family, and your grown children expect you to be the same person they always wanted you to be and expected you to be. What happens when you have your own sense of now you have the free time, but not very much time? A decade goes by like zip.
Oh my God, it does.
What are you going to do with, the poet Mary Oliver says, your one wild and precious life. And wild for me is that which you came into the world with. It was just inherently in you. And it hasn't yet, that part may not have been developed yet. okay, so you're 60 years old. You still could develop it. So that's one of the...
Right on. Well, that's, I share with my audience all the time, you know, the birth of this show was my basically complete burnout and a midlife crisis where I completely pivoted my life, hence the name Awakening Aphrodite, because I was over masculinized. I was kind of living more of an Athena life, being daddy's little girl and, you know, trying to do the right thing and what was expected of me. And I pretty much shut down my whole feminine self and wasn't living a life of my choosing. I was just doing what I was trying to do to get approval and love. And like so many people do. So I'm just so grateful this second half of my life, I now have the luxury to choose. How blessed I am that I can now choose the second half. And that's why I love my show, having people like you on it, because I'm finding where my heart is sending me. I'm living Aphrodite in me. Finally, she has a chance to express herself, because that she has been muffled for my whole life. She had a gag on her, that's for sure. So I'm now so blessed and grateful. And I love how in your story, you're so accomplished as a doctor and all that in your beginnings. And you really had an epiphany one day when you went to the mountains and you had asked Great Spirit, you know, how can you help, and thank you, and how can I show you thank you? And I'm paraphrasing it. Do you want to share that at all? Because it was very powerful. What happened to you?
Well, it's not something that I've put in print yet, but one of the things that I have written but withdrew was my memoir, because I finished what I thought was my memoir as a pandemic broke out. And I clearly got the feeling I'm not done yet.
Right on, you're not. Like we said in the beginning, you're just getting started. The whole thing was to get you ready for now what you got to do for the world.
So I'm not done yet, so I withdrew my memoir. But at some point, I'm realizing that the last section will be about what I have been doing since the pandemic. And I will get to that. But the question about what started things is that I thought I was going out into the world to be a lawyer, because I was a high school debater and I was just really good at what I was doing. You know, I was a sort of star high school person. And I thought that I could kind of take credit for it or something. Well, I went to a spiritual religious camp in the mountains and had a profound sense of how fortunate and how much everything that I had claimed as my own, yes, I had put effort into it, but it all had to do with what was beyond me. It had to do with the sense of how lucky I was to have the parents I had, to be in the timing I was in. And I took credit for my elections to class and school offices and clubs and whatever. And I felt truly humbled by the realization about how I had the deeper realization of humility, which is a very interesting feeling to get, actually. It's profoundly a feeling of deep gratitude and a sense of then what grew out of that for me was service. How do I say thank you? I mean, the question to divinity was, well, then how do I say thank you? And to get up in the mountains and to get a sense of you could serve people, you could be a doctor. And in a chapel, I ended up saying, you know, I would. Except that none of my natural talents were in sciences and chemistry and whatever.
And math
and all that.
Physics,
But I took it seriously. I mean, I truly did take it seriously. And then when I went on to college, what I then kept serious was that I will take the pre-medical courses, but I will also take the courses I love, which was history, which was art appreciation, art, you know, looking at art and learning about art and all kinds of different things that I loved to learn. And then there was basic math that were math, physics, chemistry, all those courses that I would not have taken by choice. And I could get through them, but I wasn't a star in them. I was adequate. And so because I had promised divinity way back when, and by the time I was getting toward my senior year, I could think, well, I could have made a mistake.
Are we sure about that agreement?
So I will apply to medical school. And if I do not get in, maybe I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But I was quite serious about having made a promise. But I also could accept that it could have been an error. So I applied to medical schools. And lo and behold, the one that I got into, I thought in the interview itself was that, well, that's that. It's not going to, I'm not going to be accepted here. It was to the University of California in San Francisco, and the major hospital up on Mount Parnassus, the name of the street, had the name of a doctor on it, was the name of the hospital. Herbert C. Moffat Hospital. I was interviewed by Herbert C. Moffat Jr., who was a Boston Brahmin kind of a physician doctor.
Yikes.
Who had this sort of proper Boston persona on. And he looked at my grades and schedules and whatever, and he saw all of the art classes and history classes and things I took. And he said to me in such a way that I either misinterpreted it or heard it wrong, but it was as if he looked at it from a distance and said, "Do you really like all this stuff?" Something like that. Wow. And I thought, well, guess I'm not making any points in this interview. Yeah. And then it was followed up by a second interview that went, even from my standpoint, even worse, because I got interviewed by one of the heads of the Department of Psychiatry. And he promptly went into the vulnerability that I had, which was with a very handicapped brother. And so I was asked about my brother and how it had impacted me, or at least that's what I was talking about. And I started to cry. So between being sniffed at by the Boston Brahmin doc and crying because and actually he was the head of the Department of Psychology in the Department of Psychiatry, and his feeling sense of asking me a relevant question that just, there were the tears. I left that medical center saying, well, that was that. I'm not going to be. And then I got acceptance. And then I got accepted. Well, that was that. I really did promise to be a doctor. And I did enter medical school. And I did find that unlike the courses that were pre-meds, the medical classes, scientifically based courses, were relevant, because if I learned those courses, I could help people. And my major kind of direction was wanting to help people, to make a difference, to make things better. I seem to have that kind of a drive in me. So I did, but I still didn't know that what I wanted to do in medicine. I graduated, went down to LA County Hospital and took a general residency. I thought I was going to be an internal medicine doc. Didn't. Then I got re-invited to come up to UC because I had I'd submitted an application for the Department of Psychiatry because I really did enjoy working in the clinic as a student, intern sort of person. But I didn't finish the application because I just didn't. I wasn't that sure. So I didn't assume that I had you had to put an application in, but you also had to put in who you were going to ask for recommendations. And I didn't do that. So I considered I had not completed my application. And lo and behold, here I'm down at LA County Hospital, and what do I get? a notice, a wire, telegraph wire from UC saying, "We accept you into the Department of Psychiatry residency. Please respond by return wire." And I was just floored. And I just wanted to get back to San Francisco because I love the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And I figured a year of psychiatry wouldn't hurt any, whatever I decided to go into, a year of psychiatry would be just fine. But in that first year of psychiatry, I found I had a gift for it. It took me that long from the time I was up in the mountains.
Wow.
To then, and the course I was on, to find that I had arrived at where I needed to be. And so.
Amazing. I love that.
I don't know how it all turned out so well, but it is a mixture of keeping one's word and having a sense of privilege and humility compared to what I saw around me. So whatever it is, whatever it is that anyone has in them, that where they feel like they are on a certain kind of calling or path, and you don't know where it leads necessarily. And so I use often as a Greek mythology thing about how in ancient Greece you would get to major intersections, and the idea is to wait at the intersection while you thought, which of the two paths shall I take? And at the major intersection, there was a statue of the three of goddesses that looked in three different directions. They could see the goddess saw where you came from and looked down the two paths that you could choose. And I love that image because over and over again, people are in that position where they've reached the point where there is a decisive thing. Should I do this or not? And my sense is that you should stay at that intersection until you get a clarity inside yourself. And then when you get a clarity inside yourself, that you're supposed to go that way, even though you don't even quite get the direction, which is that whole pre-med thing for me. But at some point, there's that sense of it opens up and that was right. Now, I don't know that it's true for everybody, but it certainly was true for me. And it had to do with an inner pledge, but an inner humility too,
Well, that opened you up. The humility opened you up to receive it. I think when our hubris, our arrogance, we're not receptive, so I think the humility is a requirement to receive the download, the guidance. It's just so beautiful and it's critical.
You must have done something similar.
Oh, absolutely. I sure have. That's why I keep telling you, I know we have a lot of differences, but we have a lot of similarities. And I think a lot of times too, people aren't comfortable with the uncertainty. Didn't Jung call it the transient function or transcendent function?
I'm not sure. Transcendent function is usually
it's the time when you're in that kind of no man's land of you're in between. You don't really know what to do. So they say just don't do anything when you're not sure. And people are uncomfortable with that liminal space of like, I don't have a clear direction right now. But you gave a beautiful example of how you were strong enough to sit with the uncomfortableness of not knowing, really, until you got a clear, okay, this is where to go. We have to be patient.
Were you?
Yeah, I struggle with it. Yeah, I struggle with it. But, baby steps. And I think, too, the analogy of a labyrinth is helpful, of how, you think you're going this way and all of a sudden you start going a total 360 and you're, wait a minute, I thought the end was over there. And, but that's what makes life interesting, too. If we knew the end of the journey, the end of the movie, why are we going to watch the whole movie, right? So, you know what I mean? What's the point of the whole thing? So, yeah, I struggle with that, to be honest, because there's some areas of my life where I'm more proficient at, more confident about, and then there's other areas where I'm like, will you please show me a sign, make it clear, because I'm kind of thick-headed, I guess, like what direction and like you, I want to serve, I want to help, I want to do the right thing. And I am so blessed. I do have many choices right now of where am I in my life. But what do I do with my mind? What do I do with my talents? What do I do with my energy and my health? Where can I invest it for the best outcome for the planet and for everybody? And not wanting to miss the sign. One of my biggest faults is I try too hard sometimes, and that's not always smart. Sometimes you just got to relax and let it happen. Don't overkill it. That's a fault of mine for sure.
Well, mostly it's a combination of persevering at doing what feels right for you to do, and the other part of it is open to the synchronicities and unexpected events and choices that come your way. So there's this sort of place where you have control over a certain level of perseverance, but you don't have control over the wider field in which something, an opportunity, a disaster, something comes along and totally shifts your sense of being in control of things. And the combination can lead, as I have a feeling it has for you, led you to be open to what next. And it's taken you this far, but you're still open to what is after this.
Oh, I will be a lifelong learner, that's for sure. But I'm getting better. And I think too, like I like to share with people, is it starts with just, like you said, the humility to ask, and then be open-minded as to how you get the guidance, how you get the feedback, and is it a feeling, is it a vision, is it a dream,
right.
Is it, the synchronicities are very powerful. There's no such thing as a coincidence per se, right?
Well, there's the need to, often somebody will have a dream and a person in the dream will be a surprise because you haven't seen that person for a long time. And then synchronistically, you see the person on the street or on the television or on the whatever.
Or they call you.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And you could say, oh, geez, that was amazing. Or you could say, what did that person symbolize? And to go deeper into the synchronicity of it will really help show the way, so and it's somewhat of a puzzle. But one of the gifts that people have and know they have is if they're doing something that is inside of them and that they deeply love, even though it's hard, they lose track of time.
Yes.
Well, if you were in a class that was a requirement, like those pre-med courses I didn't really love, you watch the clock.
Oh, right. I've been there, done that.
Yeah, it's serving time. The difference between serving time and truly living time makes a huge difference, just in everything.
Totally agree. And I'm so blessed with my show. I am so blessed because the first half of my life, I didn't have something like this. That happens to me, even just preparing for guests like you. It's like, I could just get lost in reading all your books and like half the day's gone. And I'm like, oh my God, I feed my dog. Like, it's like, and it's a lot of work. It's a labor of love. I like to say, and it's, as opposed to just labor, which is just labor. There's no love in it. And that brings us back to Aphrodite, right? But I think too, just before we close that chapter on synchronicity, share with us, you mentioned about now the Aquarian age is really, really moving, and we're in this threshold period, this liminal time. Is there anything you want to share in your experience with the audience on how people can get through this time? We're at this critical threshold, not only for the planet, like you mentioned, but ourselves as humanity. What are your thoughts on that?
The word liminal grew in me as a word, and I've been using it a lot and spreading it around as much as possible, because liminal is a Greek word, or Latin word rather, that is a threshold between, when you step through a doorway, you step over a threshold. When you and like a marriage rite used to be, you were, as a woman, carried over the threshold. You left one stage of your life as the maiden. you were carried over the threshold and were the wife. And it was a time of major shift in who you are.
So it's symbolic.
Symbolic. Okay. So liminal thresholds don't usually last very long, but the pandemic has made it almost 2 years already, where suddenly things are different. And people have more, if they're fortunate, and well, most people have to spend more time knowing themselves, because you can't just be sociable all over the place and things. You spend a lot of time in one place. And this is when you can dream. And I think people should pay attention if they get major dreams.
Okay.
And feel about them, think about them. It helps in transitions to you to, and then if synchronicities happen and out of the blue, you hear from somebody who represents a phase of your life, for example. Think about that. I mean, we get hints all over the place if we have the opportunity to do that.
Yes. Pay attention. Pay attention.
And then also when you're on track, you get affirmations.
Yes.
Do an affirmation right now. I'm sitting up in my house in Mill Valley, and I'm able to talk about a subject that you reminded me of because you brought up Aphrodite. So I took out Goddesses in Everywoman this morning and read about the alchemical goddess. And you know, the combination of Aphrodite and Artemis must be your two archetypes, right?
It certainly is, my friend. And you know what's funny? I wanted to name the show Aphrodite, or I was going to combine the two names, but I knew no one would know what the show meant. And unfortunately, Aphrodite, or whatever, unfortunately for Artemis, Aphrodite is much more well known. So if I name the show Awakening Artemis, although I already was Artemis, I had to awaken Aphrodite in me.
Right.
So, but you're absolutely right. I am right down the middle. But I'm getting to be more of Hestia, though, with my women's circle, thanks to you, by the way. But anyway, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No,
You were telling about Aphrodite's alchemical nature, why she was unique.
And is able to make her own choices, which was not true of women who were identified with Aphrodite at all until maybe now.
Absolutely critical. Yeah.
But you see, especially when you grow into Aphrodite, it is the beauty of being moved in lots of ways. So the women who get into painting or poetry, for example, it comes up with images, comes up with an aesthetic element, which is Aphrodite is not the goddess of sexuality. She's the goddess of love and beauty that, when expressed in a deep relationship, is sensual and can be sexual. But somehow she got reduced to, like, she might as well be a prostitute. She just is drawn to everybody. Well, it's true. There's a certain level in which an Aphrodite woman is drawn to everybody. She wants to get to know everybody. So she is able to do what you do when you interview people. You can devote your full attention to the person you're interviewing. And this is what psychotherapists can do too. You know, you're totally involved and interested in the person you're working with, like I am. And there's a definition of what you're doing together. It isn't mistaken. There is love in between. There is a fascination with the other person, but it isn't about stimulating a pass being made or something like that. So it's very helpful to kind of have a sense of boundaried relationships. Within which your heart, your love, your sense of beauty in the other person, you're being fascinated by the other person because of the connection. That is how you get to know people often, if you have Aphrodite in you.
Yes, it's because it's about the relationship. Yep. I love that. That's so, so important.
And then if you have Aphrodite and Artemis, which you mentioned, Artemis draws the boundary so that you can do Aphrodite, but you maintain your own autonomy.
Yeah.
So that's a nice combination.
Oh, thank you. I'm still working on the Aphrodite part, like I keep confessing. But yeah, Artemis has served me well. And again, our like-mindedness with activism and, egalitarianism and, oh my gosh, protecting nature and children and trees, our love of trees. Your wonderful book, Like a Tree, is so beautiful. And my love of dogs and the mystic quality of the moon. She's the goddess of the moon and the hunt. And we have a lot in common with that. Do you have any advice for women who want to cultivate more of their Aphrodite nature and, to help balance that strong masculine that a lot of women are living in modern society right now?
It has a lot to do with creativity. Use what you have without messing up your life. I mean, this is one of the problems with...
Don't have an affair is what you're saying? Don't jump the mailman? Okay.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good advice.
Okay. I'll be more blunt than you. Okay. So use your creativity and think of expressing your love in different outlets than just sex.
Oh, definitely, because when you see what you're seeing or doing and you appreciate the beauty of it, you're involved, you lose track of time, you're present, but if you are also aware of the necessity for boundaries and staying loyal to the relationships you do have and things like that, and trust yourself to be able to become who you were meant to be. You're the person in charge of that particular significant, major task of life. Become who you were meant to be. Develop the talents that were inherent in you. And take pleasure in life. And don't expect it to get off scot-free, because you learn through suffering, you learn through loss, you learn through love.
We learn compassion and humility through those things for sure as we get older. Yep, for others and ourselves. Such great advice. You say that your hobby is changing the world. I love that. That's very inspiring. And but your hobby is also your job, because that's what you're doing with your profession. So how beautiful. Do you have trouble with boundaries, Jean? Because your hobby is your job.
No, it's because I also began with Artemis as my strongest early archetype. And Artemis is one able to have privacy, who values privacy.
Yep.
And things like that. And so there's a certain naturalness about valuing boundaries that Artemis has. Artemis also wants to explore and know more things. Artemis likes to enter the wilderness over and over again. So that's why if you're an Artemis and you're stuck in a life where people just expect you to be the same person over and over again, but the Artemis in you would have you explore and learn more about what you're drawn to, really.
Yeah, I'm so Artemis.
Well, it takes some practice to succeed at what you do with an Artemis. I mean, she's an archer. You don't automatically know how to hit targets. You have to practice. You have to persevere.
Very true. Very, very true. I even can tell from my first few podcast shows. I mean, hopefully I'm a little bit better at it now, but I think I am better. And yeah, as all things, right? It just takes time and effort. And yeah, that's just beautiful. So do you have any, just as we're getting toward the end here, any thoughts on now how the goddess movement and this divine feminine movement is kind of so vogue right now, mainstream? From someone like you, do you have anything that you'd like to share with the world on what you think about that?
Oh, I think there's a lot to be said about the courses that are offered online with the breakout groups, and the sense of being in circle is what I think can change the world quietly. Just as it was consciousness raising groups in the late 60s. It appeared to be just women talking together. Blah, nothing important here. But it was the raising of consciousness in those groups that led to the women's movement in the 70s. And the little book that I wrote about the Mayan Circle presented the vision.
Right here, everybody, if you're on YouTube.
of women, women who meet together and learn to trust one another and put the dream that they have into the circle and have it held by the other members who want each to become who they were meant to be, and to explore parts of themselves that they wanted to explore, knowing that within the standard lives that they have, that they probably are discouraged from that often. So the circle is like a growth medium if once there's a trustworthy heart-to-heart connection. So I think of it as a circle with a sacred center, with that unknown whatever it is that is spirituality in human beings. It's not just religion at all. It is something deeper and broader, an innate nature that human beings seem to have. That's why we've worshipped all kinds of things as human beings forever and had all kinds of religions. But inherent in it is a sense that there's something deeper and invisible that has to do with the sacred and the spiritual. So I really would encourage women to form circles, to learn to trust one another and put their dreams in and to be held by it, and to speak from the heart.
Yes. Yes.
And it's like the center grows and it becomes easier and easier to form, so that, like the circle I've been in with 5 other women, it's been for 3 decades maybe by now, 2-3 decades.
That's incredible. Wow.
And we've been doing it mostly online, thanks to, what's possible here. And I'm also hearing from women who had deep friendships back in college, but then everybody scattered and moved all over the place, including other countries. Now they are in circles online. So you can form a circle with those, so anyway, every woman should have at least one circle of support.
That's what I did. I made an online women's circle, and it's been a game changer. I have been, because I know you've been talking about it for a while, and I finally got your book, and I finally did it, and I've just been blown away how powerful it is, because, unfortunately, women have maybe the patriarchy or whatever, we just kind of we're bred to be more competitive, because what she gets I can't have, and all externally focused, and who's better looking, better whatever, competing for men, and all that negativity but the Artemis is the sisterhood, right? And we need to be in sisterhood and in partnership with our sisters. And that's what the circle does. And your description made me think of like a womb. It's a gestation place where things can grow, because we're feeding it together. And we need people in our lives that support our dreams. We need people to help feed our dreams. And if you don't have that in your immediate family, join a circle. Find the people that will support you, because they're out there. Join mine. Join Jean's. Join somebody's. I mean, your website, doesn't it have the Millionth Circle have a locator or something?
Yeah, the millioncircle.org.
Yeah.
But it isn't making circles. It's seeding the idea much more. And the Shift Network has been doing a number of courses that have led some, since anything that does breakout groups, the possibility of learning how to speak online in a breakout group from the heart or soul leads you to realize that you can form a circle online, even if you no longer live near somebody you've known for a long time. You can connect with sisters.
Yep. Yes, there's pros and cons to the in-person circles, and now the online is, basically what you're saying too. And I agree. I mean, it's, like it enables you to be with me right now, me to get to interview you. And so we'll just be grateful for that. And circles are the same way. So thank you. This has just been incredible. Is there any last thoughts that you have on your heart to share?
No, we've ranged over so many. You see, but this is part of what I trust with things. In an interview in which there's a range of subjects, maybe there was one or two little seeds that somebody really needed to hear.
For sure. Well, I warned you at the beginning. I have all your books. I had so many, and you are so accomplished. I mean, you have contributed so many significant things to the world. How could I possibly pick one or two topics to talk to you about when I had my one chance? Wow. I apologize for that. But like you said, hopefully we gave people even just curiosity to go and get your books, to follow your work, to attend your webinars. And don't you also do a retreat at the Feather Ranch?
I did a feathered pipe last year. But since COVID, I have taken the pleasure of participating in conferences in South America, in Europe, and in parts of North America, where I feel like I'm doing what my function is, which is to, and it's in what you do with your programs. It's like it's synchronicity that somebody tunes in at a certain time and hears something that is significant. And it's probably to her, although there are men these days who are in the circle. There are men these days who are more natural, egalitarian people.
Certainly.
And as we move into this age of Aquarius, I'm hopeful that men and women together, the non-patriarchal, hierarchical sorts of folks who want to dominate things, that we all might together grow and help and be who we could be. And then the other possibility is that when we cross over, it could very well be that that who we are becomes aware from a liminal place. Again, using the word liminal, that when you leave your body, there seems to be a time in between. It's like the stages of the moon. You enter the dark of the moon before the end of the cycle of one moon, say. And I'm curious, like at some point I'm gonna, a decade goes by zip. So it won't be too long before I do liminal stuff. And I'm curious, and I do have a sense that there's a time, as long as there are people on this side that I care about and love, or causes that matter to my heart, that I'm not going to go rushing into the next stage of previous lives or something like that. I'll probably be in that threshold place where one can hope to be helpful still.
Indeed.
So I'm ending our little interview here by bringing up this weird element. And it used to be known as the Weird Sisters, spelled WYRRD.
The three weird sisters.
A Celtic world that believed in such things. So.
Well, I think it's very appropriate. I'm right with you on that. That's amazing. And yes, such a beautiful thought as we step into the age of Aquarius and the egalitarian time where men and women are complementary, not competitive. And it's beautiful. And we appreciate and respect and admire and love the differences because they come together to make the whole, which then has a synergistic effect.
I can't resist saying one more thing, and that is that we all have male archetypes in us as well as the female ones.
Well, now I'm going to have you back on the show. Now you just did it, okay? Because, oh my gosh, do I have questions on that one. That's great. I told you, everybody, she's just an unbelievable wealth of information and important information. That's a great point. We are everything, right? We're all of it. That's for sure. We're all of it. And you mean the universe, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Wow. Okay. So please tell people how they can find you, if you want to point us to any of your books, your work, anything in particular.
Oh, I just like, this is my website, which is simplified to JeanBolen, www.jeanbolen.com.
Mm-hmm.
And right on the homepage, you can sign up, and once every month or two, you might get a newsletter from me. But basically, you could then know what I'm up to, and if I'm up to something that is of interest to you, you could find it.
Certainly. And I do encourage everyone to join your newsletter, because it's how you find out about Jean speaking at webinars online, where a lot of them are free. That's how I got to watch you with Gloria Steinem just about 6 months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It was free, you guys did. So definitely it's worth signing up for, and definitely get her books. The Goddesses and Everywoman, if you're watching on YouTube, is here. Sold over 1 million copies. It's crazy. The Millionth Circle, Like a Tree, so many books. And they'll all be in the show notes, by the way, everybody. If you're driving or busy and helping the kids, doing laundry, doing carpool, don't worry. Just go to the show notes, her website, her links, everything will be there. We got you covered. Wow. Okay, we're stepping into the year of the tiger. Here we go. Thank you so much, Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. I really appreciate you being on Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier.
Thank you. My heart to yours.
Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier, and I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's AMYFOURNIER.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FitAmyTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also FitAmyTV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.